and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you.
Hi, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is not only my business partner and podcast co-host, Tom Dillon. Hi, Tom.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very well, very excited to be joined by another coaching doctor today. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, not only are you here, but the lovely Natasha Holmes is here as well. So we're going to do one of our lovely interviews. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's lovely to see you. So let me introduce the lovely Dr. Natasha Holmes to our podcast today. She is a locum paediatric doctor, a life coach and wellbeing workshop facilitator, also a mental health advocate. And she's the co-creator of the Fully Well Doc Pod podcast. And that's all about inspiring and empowering doctors to make change in their personal and working lives for greater happiness, fulfilment, whilst having genuine conversations about the challenges faced by those in the medical profession. Wow, Natasha, you are doing a lot.
Probably a little bit too much. Hi, Helen and Tom. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Good. So it's been a long time since we spoke, but you were on our transformational coaching diploma back in 2021, finishing early part of 2022. So it has been a long time. So I think you were cohort 10 of our program. We're up to about cohort 40 now. So
wow.
A
Thriving.
long time ago. But lovely to be catching up with you and just to find out what's been happening since you were on our program. So I think there were lots of different things going on back then. I seem to recall you doing lots of blogging at the time. Lots of walking to a cafe to sit and do some blogging.
Very much so, yes. And I loved our little practice coaching sessions that we have throughout that course. They actually really helped me to think through a lot of what I was doing then and to kind of build on that to be where I am now. So
very good. So we're interested to find out about that journey because obviously you are a doctor, which for most people is enough. That's like a full-time occupation. There's not a lot of room for anything else in life. So what drew you to coaching and well-being and that space as well as being a doctor?
Yeah, so a lot of my work is actually inspired by the fact that I really struggled in my second year as a doctor. So I was quite unlucky. I ended up in a really unsupported work environment in quite a niche specialty where you're expected to kind of step up and do a lot of things that were probably a little bit outside of my remit at the time. And for a lot of people were quite difficult. And as a result of that, I ended up getting quite burnt out. And then I experienced anxiety and depression. And I had to take time off work to recover. And in the end, I ended up taking about 6 months out of work, 3 months initially, and then another 3 months. And during that time, when I started to recover and started to get better, I was actually reading a lot. And that's probably the first time that I came across coaching tools. I didn't really realize it at the time, but I was using things like the wheel of life, the coaching wheel, to think about the different areas of my life and to think about what I wanted really and how I could look after myself and to rebuild the building blocks of my wellness and start from fresh. And as a result of those experiences, I came to a few different realizations, mainly the fact that a lot of doctors struggle with their mental health. It's extremely common. It's still quite taboo. It's not very talked about, but it's sort of a perfect storm, really, of our personalities, our traits of being perfectionist and very hardworking and competitive, together with our work environment, which can be quite unforgiving at times. And I started to want to help other doctors to improve their own well-being. And I didn't really know what that would look like. That's when I came into coaching again, and another sort of touchstone with coaching where I had some coaching myself. Funnily enough, when I had it, I was actually really resistant to having the coaching. I really couldn't see how it was going to help me, which is extremely ironic looking at it now. But I just had no idea really what coaching was. And I found the idea of sitting and talking with somebody about what I wanted to do and how I would do it and all of those kind of things a bit awkward. But it was a completely transformative experience. And it helped me to set up my mental health advocacy page, thewell_doctor on Instagram, and my blog as well, thewelldoctor.org, where I sort of started talking about all of these things. And then I realized I probably wanted to help other people by becoming a coach myself. So that's when I found you. And very grateful for that course. Absolutely fantastic course that helped me to get those skills to start helping other people.
So quite a journey for you then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that sort of realization of not being in a good place as a doctor. And I think you're right. Obviously on our course, we talk about the drivers and that perfectionism as a driver, and maybe the people pleasing also as a driver for a lot of doctors. And that, as you say, be strong. You're not allowed to show weakness. And I think those three combinations, those drivers in combination, are a perfect storm for heading for burnout, aren't they? Yeah, and as you say, the system will just soak it all up. The system doesn't really care, does it?
No, it really doesn't. And I think most doctors don't understand enough about their own psychology to sort of come to grips with it or be able to help themselves.
Yeah. Good. So in what ways are you now using coaching?
Well, I guess there's the obvious way, which is that I am providing coaching for doctors at the moment, mainly dealing with themes of imposter syndrome and confidence and work-life balance mainly. But I actually think I use coaching in every aspect of my life. So I definitely took away a lot from the course about how to coach myself and all the exercises that make you think through, okay, do this exercise on yourself and then practicing with other people. But it really made me understand a lot more about what motivated me and how my own psychology worked. So it actually really helped me with my mental health. And when I struggle these days, or if I'm coming against an obstacle or I'm trying to achieve something or move forward with something, I often refer back to those tools a lot. Not just with myself, I do that with friends as well. I find that I do it with family members, just taking that sort of person-centered approach to kind of have those difficult conversations to move forward. And I would say, I think it's made me a better doctor as well on many fronts, partly because I feel I have this whole other aspect outside of my medical work, which makes me feel really fulfilled, but also difficult conversations with parents. So I work in paediatrics, so I'm often dealing with parents. A lot of those parents will be quite scared because their child is sick and they don't know how to express that. So it can often come across as aggression. And I often use coaching skills to get to the root of what's actually worrying them and to help them express what their needs and desires are. And then we can actually have an open conversation about it rather than me sort of telling them what's happening, or which can often make things worse. It's a bit like when you try to give somebody advice, really. Yes, I use the coaching techniques for those conversations as well.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. Let's say not only in terms of formal coaching, but also those just everyday conversations where it's really useful. And we find that a lot, that people will, it will just permeate all aspects of their life. Just end up being better. I don't want to use the word conversationalist because that sounds as though it's just a chat, but just in terms of communication skills and being able to have better conversations, I think.
Yeah, agree.
So I'm really interested to know, Natasha, you use it in many different ways, and you mentioned how it helped. The tools and techniques that you learned helped you along the way. And we do get that a lot. In fact, we were told by someone that they joined the course because they were going to pay for coaching anyway. They might as well get a qualification at the end of it. So
very practical.
It's very pragmatic. So I'm wondering, of all the tools that you've learned, which might be your favourite?
That's really difficult. I like so many of them. I like tools, and I like the different kind of techniques and those kind of exercises, obviously in the right context with the right person. But do you know, I'm going to say something that I'm worried might sound a bit boring, but I'll show you why I don't think it is boring, which is scaling. So I really like to use scaling because it's actually extremely versatile. Just to give kind of two examples of how I might use that, I often use scaling to help people increase their accountability towards themselves. So if we come towards the end of a coaching session and they've come to a few different action points, 1, 2, and 3, I will ask them, okay, on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely do you think that you are to actually do this? And if they say 6, then I'll say something like what Tom taught us, which is, okay, what would it take to get you from a 6 to a 7? And then they'll kind of think about it and they'll come up with actually a really practical way to achieve that goal. Another way that I use it is when I'm doing confidence coaching. So it's actually a really good way to get people to think in a structured way about what confidence is. So I'll ask them, what do you actually think confidence means? What does a confident doctor look like to you? And we'll sort of list out all those characteristics of what they think a confident doctor is. And then I will get them to use scaling to think about, okay, from 0 to 10, how much do you think that you embody this particular trait? And in that way, they can see that, okay, maybe on some of these things they're a 0 or a 1, but on other things there'll be a 5 or a 6. And so that kind of increases self-efficacy and their belief that actually, actually, maybe I'm not, this is now something concrete and maybe I'm not that bad. And yes, there are certain elements that I need to work on. And then they can pick, okay, I want to start with the one where I feel 0, or actually I want to work on something where I'm already quite confident and kind of come into it slowly. So I think scaling is a really versatile tool that can be used in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I love that. And I've used it in confidence work as well, but in a slightly different way. So where we've scaled how confident they are in the role that they want to improve their confidence in. And then we've looked at where else in their life do they feel more confident. And so they've scaled that. And then we look at the strengths they can bring across from that role into the existing role. So really it has so many uses, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love that. Another way of kind of looking at self-efficacy, kind of drawing on other areas of life.
Yeah, we get a few doctors on the course that are quite resistant to it because they associate it with pain, if being asked that question around how bad the pain is. so yeah, it's a bit of, I don't like that question.
Interestingly, I find the GPs are more resistant to it and the consultants love it. So there's obviously a different association there. So we're generalizing, but so the scaling question is a question, but it's also a tool. So if you had to, if you were forced to decide which would be your favorite or your current favorite question that you might ask someone.
That's a really good question. I think my current favorite question is when somebody's struggling to move forward with something, I will either ask them, what the barriers are to achieving that. That's not actually my favorite question. My favorite question is sort of asking that question first and then seeing what they say. And when they're talking about it, I will obviously take note of the content of what they're talking about in terms of barriers. So either feelings or thoughts. And I'll look at their expressions as well. So a bit of kind of gestalt sort of aspect of coaching and looking at their, what's happening with the tone of voice, with the body language, etc., with their eyes, their face, and then reflecting that back to them. So saying, oh, when you said that, you looked like this, or you sounded like this, and then sort of asking them what that is about. And also, and sort of a second part to that question being, what would you do if you didn't think that? Or what would you do if you didn't feel that? Because I think we often underestimate what's holding us back. So for example, I used that recently with a coachee where they were thinking about ways that they could make their job work for them so that they could be happier at work. And one of the options was leaving the NHS, but it's something that they felt really guilty about. So I asked them, okay, what would you do if you didn't feel guilty? And that was just sort of opened everything up because suddenly they could imagine maybe being somebody else and somebody who wasn't held back by that feeling and what they might do. So it allowed them to move past that feeling and think about different options.
Lovely. That's really lovely because it is so hard to get past sometimes that way of thinking, but that allows some imagination and exploration and excitement to come in about what if that wasn't there.
Yeah, definitely. And that coachee actually went on to change their career actually, and I think they're a lot happier for it now. So I was very excited with the result of that.
Wonderful.
Very good. And you mentioned within the course of our conversation a couple of approaches to coaching, so person-centered and Gestalt. What would you say your coaching style is landing as?
I think I have a tendency to be solution focused. I love a goal. And even if we're just exploring an idea, I think that's a goal in itself. So I found that without the anchor of a goal, you end up getting lost in the weeds a little bit. So I will often get people that are coming to coaching with me to kind of fill out a quick form to say, okay, what are some goals that you think you might want to work on? And then we start exploring those. But then every time we have a new session, I'll say, okay, so these were your goals last time. Do you have a new goal this time? Do we need to add to this goal? Do we need to change this goal? So very much solution focused, and all of the techniques that kind of come with that, trying to keep them accountable to themselves, looking at updates, reinforcing their self-efficacy and their skills, and sort of having a reflective session at the end of each coaching session, just to kind of think about what worked, what didn't work, what have we learned this time, things like that.
Yeah, I love the fact that you say keep them accountable to themselves.
I learned that from you, Tom. Yeah. Don't become everybody's mom, even though I really have that tendency. Yeah, I recognize that I'm a very quite maternal person. So I try not to baby my clients too much.
Good. Excellent stuff. So you've mentioned a few different professional roles that you have. I'm very interested in your podcast. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that podcast was sort of inspired by the fact that I was doing all of this mental health advocacy online, on Instagram, but I very much found it to be a bit of an echo chamber where you're kind of preaching to the converted. So what I really wanted to do was, okay, let's talk about the realities of being a doctor. Let's talk about why that's difficult. And let's talk about solutions. So it was about finding a way to get to people before they experience any difficulties with their mental health, before they maybe start to feel trapped or maybe think they don't have other options. Because I think a lot of that is what can affect your mental health and your well-being is when you can't see a way out of it. And it was also inspired by the fact that I got a bit tired of all the advocacy that is kind of saying it's okay not to be okay. That's great. It's very useful for people that are starting off. But at some point it's like, okay, but how can I be more than, not okay? How can I actually get past that? How can I move forward? So it's about bringing on people who had found ways to do that, either because they are experts in that field, like lots of coaches that we have on, or because they'd gone through something themselves and learned from it and kind of coached themselves through that process, or because they're trying to make changes. So not just on a personal level, but people who are trying to make changes in our institutions, and people trying to make changes locally in their own teams. So we really wanted to have a place where people could feel inspired and empowered to make changes in their lives on all of those different levels. So personal, team-based, and institutional, and be a bit of a sort of positive voice, but also a practical one too. Because I think a lot of the advice that exists out there already is tailored for not people who are working, for long days where you're doing 13-hour shifts, and then followed by a day off and 4 night shifts. It's great advice to say, okay, go to the gym and every day and before you go to work. It's like, but when? I already wake up at 6 a.m, So being practical, having genuine conversations, and looking at what we can do better for ourselves.
Yeah. In a previous episode, we talked about motivation, how it's very difficult to feel motivated if you're knackered. You can't. If you're exhausted, you're not going to thrive, are you? So
no.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, I would like to know something a little bit different. This is all wonderful. What does Natasha do when she's not working? Do you have time for that?
She says shyly, well, Okay, so here's the thing. I do a lot of different things. I have a lot of different caps, as you sort of probably noticed from my very, very wordy short bio that you asked me for. And I do all these different things. Obviously, mental health advocacy. I have the podcast. We record and I edit that myself, and with Emily, who's my co-host, Emily Fully Love, who's another doctor, and I guess a lot of my time is taken up by all of these different hats, also doing speaking engagements around mental health, going to conferences and things like that, and coaching as well. So as you can imagine, there's not a lot of free time, but I've been very much influenced, again, something that I was exposed to through the course, by Martin Seligman's ideas around the good life. And the fact that really to truly live a good life, a happy life, you kind of need to have meaning in your life, and it needs to be driven by your values and your strengths. And the more that you fold those into your life, the more happy and the sort of a better life you can actually have. So I don't necessarily have a lot of time for lots of different hobbies in the traditional sense, but I really find that I feel very fulfilled by what I'm doing at the moment. And somehow the combination of doing medical work and coaching and being able to be creative with my own podcast and sort of writing around mental health and talking about it is actually, they are things that fill up my cup and make me feel very rested. So they're not exactly hobbies, but they are me living my life in terms of my own values and using my strengths. So I guess I have a few things like yoga and reading and cooking and things like that, being with family. But again, these are all things that are like sort of my values. So
yeah. But this perfectly falls in line with the PERMA model that we've discussed before and the positive psychology movement. If you think about positive effect, you're experiencing those lovely positive emotions by working with wonderful people, by taking those moments of joy, by doing things like yoga and reading, all of those. You've got engagement because you're in flow with all of the things that you do and you're working with your strengths, like you say, and in alignment with your values. You know, you've got your relationships with everyone that you work with and connect with on numerous different levels. Meaning, most definitely sounds like you've got, you know, a drive towards something that you find great meaning in. And then the accomplishment side of it, to be able to do all of these things. So, you know, all of those things do fit beautifully into the PERMA model. You know, taking some time out and a bit of yoga fits into the PERMA Plus, the nice health model. So, you know, health element of the model. So, you know, you almost sounded apologetic when you said that. But I understand that all of those add to that wonderful feeling of fulfillment and flow in your life. And when you find that, it is like that old adage of finding something that you love and never having to work a day again in your life. Not, you know, in the truest sense of the word, obviously, but yeah, I understand that. That's lovely.
Yeah. And I must say that I think all of those things outside of medicine are the bits where I feel like I'm alive. I know that in a sense, that might sound a bit dark, but I think medics are quite bad at fulfillment because our job is quite a traditional job that society views as being very fulfilling because we're helping people. But, you know, day in, day out, the actual activities that you do, how much fulfillment you actually get from them really varies. And yeah, I think through all of these other things that I do, I have so much more fulfillment, I guess. So, yeah, I recommend to all doctors to kind of think about finding what that looks like for them.
Lovely. Thank you. Finally, Natasha, what would you say to any doctors out there who are considering coaching as an addition to their repertoire?
Definitely do it. You know, there's no ifs, there's no buts. I think everyone should do it because regardless of whether you decide to do it for money, it's such an important tool to have. I think it will help you in your professional life. I think it will help you in your personal life with other people. And most of all, I really think it will help you to take a step back and look at the big picture of your life and think about what you want for yourself, what you want for your future, what's actually going to make you happy, what drives you, what motivates you, all of these different things. I really feel like it's a perfectly designed, well, your course in particular, I really like, obviously. But, you know, I think it's just a perfect vehicle with which to explore your own life. And I honestly think that if I hadn't done it, I probably wouldn't have done so many different things. I wouldn't have all these tools to come back to. It's very hard on your own to kind of go and find all that information and piece it together. People do, but why not give yourself the gift of something that's just going to keep on giving and help you plan for your future and reflect and just make everything better for yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm just delighted to be able to catch up with you again, because it's been a long time. So
it has.
It's been great to have a conversation with you.
Well, I got goosebumps then when you were talking about the course and all the wonderful things that people would get from doing coaching. So, and we run the course. So, I thought that was a really powerful testimony to coaching. And I'm so, so glad that you got so much out of it and flourishing, in the words of Martin Seligman. So thank you, Natasha.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely catching up with you both. And thank you very much for the course. As you can tell, I feel like I'm putting it to good use and hopefully trying to teach other people as well some of the elements of how they can help themselves as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Fabulous.
Great to hear. Thank you. Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I'd just like to let our listeners know that in our next episode, we are going to do a listeners Q&A. So if anything that Natasha has said has triggered a question in you about coaching, or if you've been listening to other episodes and you think, I really need to ask Helen and Tom this, then do get in touch and let us know what it is. What questions do you have for us? Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you, Tom.
Yep. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Helen. And we'll see you everyone next time.
We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.